Today we're going to be continuing to take a look at a scenario where civilization starts over. We are now on episode number 8, if I am correct. And in the last episode, we saw a few events take place. I guess kind of the main two events was one, the conclusion of the Swiss question, in which we saw, I guess, kind of the Western Swiss reunite, the Republic, and then they lost some land down here and some land over here. And we also kind of saw that people migrated to England because they were like fleeing this land, basically. And then the second event that we saw was the creation of the Venetian Union, which is this powerful state here, which has kind of got all of these lands and even some lands in Africa and Anatolia itself. But yeah, before we get into this episode, I want to say I did update the map players. You might notice that there are a lot more major cities. And speaking of major cities, like, I guess if I turn this off, the main, like, major villages or settlements are the ones still visible. But, like, these smaller ones, most of them are either, like, slightly, like, you know, because obviously it's the year 100 or something, somewhere around there. So, you know, you're not going to have major sprawling cities, but you wouldn't have a single one of them. But, like, these are just kind of to show, you know, major, I guess, kind of landmarks, if you will. So, you know, this is where people would want to secure. So if you're thinking there shouldn't be this many major cities, I agree, there shouldn't. But I do think it adds quite a lot to the wars and the series, so I'm going to go ahead and keep them. But anyway, I also added, this layer's been here the whole time. I just don't think I've ever shown it or kept it in the recording, but I have a province layer. It's very detailed. There's a lot of provinces. I've been using it to draw some peace treaties. I guess I must have just not shown this. Someone told me I never showed my province layer. So I guess I didn't, but I'm showing it now. So here you go, province layer. But anyway, the first event we're going to be looking at is over here in Florence. As we see for this small brown country, that Florence has had enough of them. And we see like a dispute break out, and Florence's king will just go ahead and, you know, eradicate this place off the face of the map. And we have to go ahead and demote this little city over here, as you are no longer a capital city, because your nation is now destroyed. We also see Florence get in on the African game. I guess everyone here just wants a piece of Africa. We see Florence specifically go ahead and carve out this area. And now what's interesting about this area is that it's mainly the Berber area. And basically the main reason Florence wants this is because, kind of like in real life, how like during the Punic Wars, there was like elite cavalry, like the Numidian cavalry. That's kind of similar here. However, this specific region, like if I kind of outline it, like it's basically like the Berber people are like really good at cavalry, basically. But like this region here has very good cavalry. The cavalry does also kind of extend into this region, but getting this piece of land here does help Florence a lot, as they now have like elite cavalry, which they can go ahead and get from here. We also see over here that Valencia will be expanding its African land, like so, pushing itself out pretty, you know, far and wide. Also, I'm pretty sure, is this land unexplored? It is. That's interesting. And we go ahead and see that obviously France has to get into this game. And I know it's kind of weird because they can't go down here. They kind of have to go around, but, you know, they make it work. We see that France will go ahead and exist over here. Or I probably should say Provence, because, you know, that's what it probably should be called. But anyway, we do see in this final area that an Algerian country will be, you know, joining the map. And when I say an Algerian country, I mean two, as we see two brand new countries do go ahead and appear here. These are the only, I guess, kind of like proper African states, as, you know, all the other tribes are being like carved up by the more advanced Italians. However, these two, I guess, kind of kingdoms or duchies will go ahead and form themselves. The capital is here for this one right here in this like relatively flat land, and the other one will have their capital actually not on the coastline, or will they have it? Actually, they can kind of have theirs in this little region here. But anyway, I know last episode we saw a lot of ethnicities, and we do need to see a lot more pop up. But, you know, to go ahead and start off this episode and kick it, we're actually going to be looking at two pretty big wars, and they will both be actually taking place in Italy. Now, the first war will be pretty interesting, and we're actually going to have to go ahead and go over to the alliance layer for this, as these four countries will be getting into a bit of a dispute. And you might be asking, what is this dispute? Well, basically, Naples and this dark green country have like a border dispute here. The dark green country like basically claims that its border should push up over here, encompassing this region, whereas Naples says its border should take over this like little flatland here. And these two are kind of in violent, and neither side really wants to go to war, as they're kind of scared of what the other two big countries in the region, and maybe like Genoa and even Venice to some extent, will do. So we go in and see that this dark green country will be forming itself an alliance with one of these two countries. And they will actually be forming the Triangle Alliance over with this blue country over here. But they won't be forming any Triangle Alliance, they'll be forming the Blue Triangle Alliance. And if you couldn't guess where this is going, we see that Naples will go ahead and form its own alliance, known as the Red Triangle Alliance, over here with this little pink country over here. And if you couldn't see where this is going, it's going to a war. That seems pretty self-explanatory. But which country will make the first move? It will actually be this dark green country. As we see that this dark green country sends in its forces, if I can pick a better colour, and they will actually quickly surround Naples itself, and they will decisively crush the Neapolitan army over here, and they will also beat them in a second victory, as they quickly crush basically the main Neapolitan, is that the right word? Force, basically pushing the borders to something like this within like a matter of weeks, probably. Meanwhile, over here, news has just reached the pink team that this war is going on, and they're getting ready to mobilize. At the same time, reports from up north will report the loss of not one, but two major, villages or settlements up here as the Cyan army is advancing. Over here, a pink relief force will actually do pretty well, managing to sneak behind enemy lines, defeating a small garrison at this city. But eventually, the green army will come, and we actually see that this pink team garrison is actually just stuck over here. Meanwhile, over here, we see the blue team continues to do well, and they will actually manage to take this major city like so, as it's not looking too good for the pink team and also Naples. But eventually, we see a saving grace take place for pink team and Naples, as we see that Genoa over here goes ahead and goes, hey, listen, I have land in Rome. If you let me take, a pretty significant amount of land from these countries, you can have the dark green country, I don't care. Then I will help you join this war. Actually, I don't know why the provinces are messed up, but that should not be right, but it won't matter anyway. But Genoa basically wants this province. They said that Naples can have this one, but they want that one, basically. Didn't know if that was one province or not. But anyway, these two countries will be obviously accepting this, as we quickly see that a huge Roman army will manage to actually just take the dark green capital, defeating the forces. Pretty interesting, development, because the green team are down here. This will quickly force the green team to basically withdraw from everything, as they quickly withdraw over here. And when they go ahead and try take back their, capital city, they are decisively crushed by Genoa, and we see that the green king is killed, or the dark green king is killed, and we quickly see that the dark green country falls over just like that. Meanwhile, over here, Genoa launches an invasion into this blue country, which goes well as they manage to take this city up here after winning a pretty significant victory. We see down here that the blue team will actually continue to advance, as they actually manage to defeat the pink team and go ahead and secure this region under their control. However, up here we see a small counter army actually manage to re-liberate this city for themselves, pushing them back pretty easily. However, over here, the Genoan, army is doing incredibly well, taking these two cities, and they will near closer and closer to the capital. And this kind of forces the king, or the duke of the blue country, which has spent so long doing a very good campaign in here, to basically just completely withdraw all of his troops, which is a huge blow. However, he will come over here, and he will actually manage to do very well against, crushing them and killing, the local Duke of Rome, pushing them back a lot. Also, the borders are kind of messed up here. I don't really know why. However, we see that Naples has managed to reconfigure itself an army, and they are pushing in. Meanwhile, over here, the pink team has fully liberated its land, and Genoa has actually managed to push back the blue team, and eventually, we see that the blue duke is basically forced back to his capital city, and eventually, all three sides will launch an invasion of the city, and we see that it will fall, and the war is over, as Genoa, Naples, and the pink team have won. And we can go ahead and look at a little peace treaty. And in this peace treaty, we actually see the complete dissolvement of these two countries, with the blue country, which was pretty big, is actually just vanished off the face of the earth. And that is because the Duke of the blue country was like the last remaining Duke, and he was executed when they managed to break in and seize the town. So there's nobody left, so they just kind of split up the land, like so. But pretty importantly, we see that Genoa now actually splits the peninsula into with their, Roman land, which is now bigger than their mainland. Which is pretty interesting because they got a lot of land. They probably got the most land out of this, but I guess it's because they did most of the work, to be fair. So they had a lot of negotiating power. And then also Naples down here expanded quite a bit. These two would look way better united. Like, imagine a country like that would look pretty cool, but that is not what's happening. But what is happening is another very big, well, not very big, but pretty big Italian war. And this war will be known as the Second Italian War. And where will this war go ahead and begin? Well, I'll actually go ahead and be beginning over here in Sicily. Tensions have been ramping up between Sicily and Venice for influence in this region. I mean, you've got Africa, Malta, even over here in mainland Italy. There's a lot of conflict, and there are a lot of disputes in between these two lands. Now, looking at the alliances layer, I will just be using the exact same shapes, but we go ahead and see tensions reach a pretty big climax when we see that Sicily actually allies with Florence, out of all people. Florence is still known as like the traitors of Europe because of, you know, their shenanigans with the Swiss, which they are still allied to, by the way. But we go ahead and see that Florence will be joining this alliance. And in response to this, Venice will be making its own pact with its longtime friend Genoa over here. Also, I just deleted all the, like, you know, Italian defensive pact symbols because there's not really a need for them anymore. You just kind of know it exists. Also, I low-key forgot about this alliance. Maybe this alliance would have played into something that I didn't explore, but it doesn't really matter. We also see that Turin actually goes ahead and joins in on this alliance, like so. And is that about it? This country down here isn't in the alliance, but I guess I'll put a red triangle here for Venice, even though it's the same country. I'll also put a red triangle down here for Genoa. But pretty importantly, we also see that Trieste will go ahead and join this Blue Triangle Alliance, which just leaves these last two states here, that's kind of conflicting. And we go ahead and see that Naples will actually join the red side, with this pink country actually joining the blue side, which is pretty interesting to see, because, you know, these two just fought a war together. But tensions have re-risen again over this piece of land. These dukes just can't be happy, can they? But yeah, Second Italian War, all the Italian states are in an alliance. And this fighting will begin down here, where we see that Sicily, the Duke of Sicily, launches a surprise invasion into Venice. This conflict is also kind of religious-based, because if we look at the religious organization, we can see that obviously Milan lost this, which meant that they went ahead and needed a new kind of council member to fill this spot. And they actually had the audacity to give it over to Austria, which isn't even majority red religion, or at least like only like half of them are, which was, you know, just disgraceful over to Sicily. So this, you know, I guess kind of war also has some like religious aspects of it. But we see that Sicily will do pretty well making a defensive line here. But they will also be focusing a lot of their forces in Africa as they will swiftly secure the African colonies. And then next, they will fight a naval battle for Malta, which they will actually win, really hurting Venice's navy. They will also go ahead and take these islands. Meanwhile, we see up here that the Trieste country, which Venice was not planning on fighting, launches a surprise invasion, which they do decently well. However, we see that Venice then pushes them back. However, they still have a pretty decent foothold up here. And where they would do actually pretty well is in the Alps, as they will actually manage to secure a lot of these Alpine regions. They will even use this to stretch as far as over here, as they are doing incredibly well against Venice. And Venice is just embarrassing itself at this point. Like, you're the strongest country, yet you're losing to all these losers. But eventually, Genoa and Turin forces will come over to this front line and manage to push it back a little bit, but not that much, if I'm being honest. As the main forces are trying to stop the Florence advance, or I don't know what it is, like not Floridian, Florentine advance, something like that. As they will get super close, however, eventually they are stopped. Meanwhile, down here, we see that Genoa is doing pretty well as their elite, I guess, kind of Roman army is doing pretty good. And they actually managed to go ahead and surround Florence's second biggest city, which causes Florence to go ahead and have to pull back some troops from this front line, leading to some counterattacks as they are forced to liberate this city, in which they do, pushing it back. However, up over here, we see that Genoa manages to win two decisive battles, taking these two major cities. And now, in terms of naval might, I don't actually know who'd be stronger. I think that Genoa wouldn't actually be able to send supplies to Rome and vice versa, because Florence is got a pretty powerful navy. Venice obviously number one, but like I wonder what this dynamic would look like. However, we see Venice do a pretty interesting strategy, and they don't actually send their army stationed in this major city to go ahead and fight Sicily, which leads to some pretty big counterattacks, which makes the locals mad. They actually send it straight into this pink country, and this army will actually crush the pink army in a single battle, wiping them out, managing to take their capital. And we actually see that within the first month, this pink country basically just falls instantly. forces from all sides, mainly from Venice, will launch an invasion into this land, and they will all jointly occupy it, which is a pretty huge blow, as they were kind of hoping this would cause a thorn in these countries' sides. However, it hasn't. Up here, we see that Trieste is continuing to do well, as they actually managed to secure these two cities here. And we actually see them secure all the way around Venice, and everyone is like, what the hell are you doing, Venice? How are you losing this badly? But don't worry, Venice, because Austria is here. As we see that Venice promises Austria access to the coastline if they invade, and they will have no problem doing this. The Austrian king wants to get himself some glory. As we see that Austria comes to the help of Venice, which is the #1 country in the world, by the way, so maybe that ranking was inaccurate. But anyway, this leads to a huge counter-offensive by Venice, as we see that Trieste's army is not only defeated, but they are also completely encircled here, and they are absolutely crushed, which basically leads to all of these regions falling over, with Austria occupying that, but actually that's part of Venice, so that will go over to them. And we quickly see that Austria will do very well as they occupy a lot of the mountainous regions, taking this pretty decent port city. Meanwhile, over in these tiny areas here, we see that this region will end up going ahead over to Venice. We see from the south that Florence will come in, and they will actually manage to take this major city, as the Florentine army still has it. They're still one of the strongest armies in the world, and, you know, they're still proving why, you know, they're the Florence. And they will also push back on all sides here. However, Florence is surrounded, and this time they're surrounded by some pretty powerful enemies. Venice, Genoa, Turin, and I guess more Genoa down here, with even the Napolitan army coming up to help Genoa rather than going down south. However, we do see down here that Venice does make a pretty big counter-offensive, wiping out this group. However, we then see that Sicily will fund rebels over here in Greece. As we see over here in this major city, the, I guess, kind of Epirus rebels, because they're in the region of Epirus, will rise up, and they will do pretty well, consolidating themselves a nice region. And what will Venice do to this? Well, Venice will go over to their good old trusty friend Sparta and say, hey, Sparta, can you deal with this? And Sparta will go absolutely, as Sparta crushes these rebels up here. And we basically see that all of this rebel land resubmits after a few villages are plundered. After a few villages are plundered, leaving only this one major city here left to submit. And we actually see that this kingdom here, this duchy here is accused of supporting these rebels. So this duke is going to go one step further and wipe these people off the map. There we go. Venice just invading random countries. We see that the Circle Alliance is thinking about joining the war. However, eventually they don't, because they can't really afford it, and they're facing their own problems right now with, you know, economic problems. I just said problems like 100 times. And we see that right now Albania has been allowed to trade through here, because previously it was blocked off by Venice, but they kind of cancelled that blockade. Over up here, we see that Sicily manages to get a huge victory against the southern forces, pushing pretty far up into Venetian land, doing very well. And they will even make a naval landing over here, cutting off this last city over here, doing incredibly well, even connecting up their land, as Sicily is absolutely cooking Venice right now. However, where things aren't going too well is for Florence, as Venice is retaking this city, and they are pushing back up here. Meanwhile, over here, Genoa has fully liberated its land, and will even begin an invasion from up north. While down south, we see that the southern Florentine armies are no match for the elite Roman armies. However, Florence will then unleash its secret move, known as the Algerian cavalry. I guess I'll call it the Berber cavalry. And we see that these Berber cavalry will actually be first used in Sicily down here, as Venice has sent its elite cavalry over, as Florence has sent its elite cavalry over to Sicily, and this will allow them to absolutely crush the Venetians, taking over all of this land, and even managing to take this major city up here, as basically all of Venice has fallen, or at least southern Venice. We also see that Florence will use this to manage to push back Genoa greatly, and they will even begin their own invasion into Genoa over here, doing incredibly well. And they will finish this off by completely pushing out Genoa of their land and launching an invasion into this region. However, eventually they are counterattacked, like so, and push back pretty nicely. Up here, we see another battle take place, and Florence will use their supreme cavalry to secure a pretty nice victory against Genoa. And they will also win a few battles up here, pushing their front line with Venice further back. Over here, we see much needed reinforcements arrive, which allows a pretty big counter offensive to take place over here, as Venice managed to re-establish their stronghold in this region. Meanwhile, troops from this occupied land will push down here, and we see a huge battle take place in which Venice will actually win, managing to re-secure a lot of land over here. However, they will lose some land over here. I keep saying over here. And eventually, the front lines will look something like this, and neither side really wants this war to end. So I guess we can go ahead and look at a little peace treaty. And there we go, taking a look at this peace treaty, we can see there have been some pretty big border changes. I mean, we'll start from the north down to the south. We see that Florence has took some provinces out of Venice up here. Well, not Venice. I mean, well, the Venice, but also Genoa. Genoa, these two. Venice, these four here. I was going to give them this city, but like that felt like a bit too harsh. We see that Venice does take Trieste in this province, with the rest of it going over to Austria, which goes ahead and gives them coastline. And also, you know, all right borders. I thought it looked better than that. It doesn't actually look that good, but you know, it gives them maybe nicer borders. I don't know, that's up to you guys. But that's it for the north. Turin remains unaffected. Actually, these islands down here, these should be under Florence. I don't know who they're meant to be under. But as you see that these islands over here do go ahead and go over to Florence as part of the peace treaty, although I will actually forget that exists. In the middle, we see the Rome over here. Well, not Rome. Genoa has lost. Basically, they lost this province, which lost them access to the Adriatic, but then they gained this province from the other country that was here. So, but they still lost all of these provinces here, which was a pretty big blow to the country, as they now look really weird. Naples reached the Adriatic, taking over this country that used to be here. And then Venice actually, I mean, they definitely lost because they lost most of their southern land, losing one of their two big cities over in this region. But then they basically annexed the whole of the Pink Country. So, like, they kind of traded even, but not really, because this land is way less likely to be nice to them compared to this land, which used to be theirs. But we can basically see that Sicily absolutely whooped Venice, basically, with their, you know, Florence's advanced cavalry and Sicily's pretty genius tactics. We can also see that all of this land in Africa has gone over to Sicily over here, as they've also taken over these islands. And there we go. Those are the new borders of Italy. Sicily rising out as a pretty big power. Now, I actually feel like this recording's been going on forever and I've done 2 events. So we're going to try... This video might be a bit longer than normal. To be fair, I did go eat, so I don't actually know how long the recording actually is. But I'm just going to do all the events. I'm not going to, like, skip out some events to the next video. So either this video is really long or I look really dumb right now. One of the two. Or it's just a normal length, and then I guess I look dumb. But anyway, the next event. Actually, before we get on to the next event, I forgot to show the peace treaty over here. Venice will go ahead and annex this piece of land, like so, which will go ahead and lead to this city coming over here. And actually, I will go ahead and reward Sparta for their courageous attempts by giving over this island. And then we'll also be given these 2 provinces here. Now, this is mainly to, you know, go ahead and get the Greek problem away from Venice, because they still want Greece, but like they don't really want to deal with Athens. So Sparta is now the only one that borders Athens. This island over here also goes over to Sparta, and so does that tiny island there. As I guess every war that Sparta wins, they gain land from Venice. But yeah, you can see the war, and let's go ahead and get on to the next kind of event. But the next event we're actually going to be looking at is up here in Croatia, as we have not looked at this in a while, and a bunch of wars has happened. And if you really couldn't guess what's happened in this war, is, oh, Croatia won this war against this country. Interesting. Oh, Croatia won this war against this country. Interesting. Oh, Croatia won this war against this country. Interesting. Oh, and Croatia won a war against this country. What the hell? That is such a coincidence. Oh my god, now the borders look so much better. What the hell? Oh, thank god that that happened, so the borders would clean up. Whew. What a coincidence. No, anyway, I know this kind of does look like I just clean up the borders, which is kind of the reason. But also, like, wars like this would happen off camera. Well, off camera. Yeah, well, actually, it kind of is off camera, actually. So we're just going to go ahead and say this happened, rather than me making up 4 separate reasons for 4 wars that really don't really make a difference to the series. But next, we're actually going to be looking at the ethnicity map. First of all, by the way, this over here, I changed this to like a blue for the Central European ethnicity. We're actually going over to here, as we're actually looking at an update on the Dutch ethnicity, which has kind of expanded itself to go ahead and occupy all of this land up here. And then in the remaining space, we're actually going to be seeing a brand new ethnicity. But first, we actually see the full exploration of, I guess, kind of Jutland up here, and the partial exploration of a few of these islands. Also over here, more and more people are beginning to go ahead and explore. And up here, we see the creation of a brand new ethnicity, and this ethnicity will be known as the German ethnicity, which will go ahead and occupy a region that looks something like this for now. They will also go ahead and populate these islands. And eventually the German ethnicity looks something like this. And the ethnicity map is getting a lot more full, but where we also see exploration is over here. And we actually see a lot of exploration happen in the British Isles, as a lot more land is discovered. Eventually the British Isles end up looking something like this. And we actually see up in Cornwall that it's actually Brittany that has established a lot of land over here, establishing this pretty big Cornish state over here. And you also see that the ethnic makeup of these people is actually Brittany. Now, it's not... Okay, I keep saying Brittany. It doesn't really make any sense. But it's not like the whole land, like not the whole kingdom is made of this. Over here, there is the English people that make up a pretty good ethnic majority of this land. Something looking a bit like this. Meanwhile, in this region, we actually see a brand new ethnicity chain will be starting. Now, I'm honestly kind of running out of colours here. Colour suggestions in the comments, everyone. I honestly don't even know what to add. Like, maybe I do something like this kind of pink-ish. I was actually thinking like blue, but we already have a blue down here. But I guess it doesn't matter. But anyway, we see this kind of Welsh ethnicity end up popping up over here, which will actually be pretty big, as it will end up looking something, I guess, kind of a bit like this, maybe. The Welsh people will inhabit a region that looks something like this. Actually, I don't know. I'm struggling on these borders, I'm not going to lie. I mean, it's ethnic borders, so we'll barely look at these, but whatever. And I guess to kind of finish off this kind of, I guess, ethnicity layer, because otherwise this is just going to annoy me, we see that up over here that Scotland is eventually discovered, although there won't be any kingdoms here, because, I mean, we're mainly using, like, the Swiss as kind of, like, the main centre, or, like, Italy of knowledge. The people up here, they ain't forming a duke. They ain't forming duchies, and if they are, then, well, they're keeping them hidden. But anyway, we see this kind of Scottish ethnicity does go ahead and appear up here, looking pretty big, actually, to be fair. And we also see some further exploration. It takes place around the African coastline. And we also see that more and more of the Mediterranean is being discovered. And we see that more and more of the Balkans is also being discovered, as I guess kind of everywhere, more and more land is being discovered by people. Sorry, Cyprus, your day is not today, but it will come. Over in this region, we see the creation of this pretty big Bulgarian ethnicity, which will go ahead and occupy land that looks something a bit like this. Meanwhile, we see over here that the Greeks have spread up into this region, and they also inhabit a lot of land, like so. However, we obviously see over here that, you know, we need a Turkish ethnicity, which will obviously go ahead and exist. But we actually see a lot of exploration has taken place over here, as we're kind of entering a new era where people are trying to explore more. I mean, honestly, by the year 100, the whole world was almost explored. But, you know, this is not meant to be super realistic. But anyway, we see that a lot of more ethnic land is mapped out. Also, the Greeks up here actually stretch quite far into this region. Yeah, the Greeks are pretty populated of the Italian Peninsula, did I just say? Anatolian Peninsula. But I'm over here, it is obviously made up of Turks. However, we actually see a new ethnicity is here, which is actually going to be the Kurds. I know, I'm sorry if you're Turkish or whatever, or basically anyone that hates the Kurds. But the Kurds will populate a pretty big portion of land, ended up looking something like this. Meanwhile, we see over here this brand new red ethnicity form. Now, I'm tempted whether or not I want to just call this like Armenian, or if I should call it like George. You know what, I guess we can split it up into the 3 sub-ethnicities. But I guess we go ahead and see that the Caucasus region is also explored by people, although there won't be countries. I mean, if we look at the political map, there's a lot of land explored with not that many countries, but I will be adding countries over time, so don't worry. But anyway, this kind of, I guess, kind of Caucasus ethnicity does go ahead and appear over here looking something like this, but it needs to be split up into Armenian, Azerbaijani, and Georgian. And there we go. We see Georgian, Armenian, and Azerbaijani people do go ahead and exist in this realm. And we also see that over in Crimea, Greeks populate this land. Don't ask why. They do. Don't worry. You know, I'm not going to make the Greeks everywhere. This is probably the last place the Greeks will be expanding. At least other than, you know, kind of like Greece. But yeah, oh my god, I didn't realize how big the Greeks were, not in Greece. But anyway, are there any more ethnicities I need to add? I'm sorry that I've just been on the ethnicity layer. But, you know, I got a lot of things to do. I think that's about it But we actually see over here that a brand new country will be formed. Based around this little river here, we see that a pretty small, I guess, kind of local tribe will emerge. However, we quickly see that this local tribe ruler will quickly unite and conquer out and push out his lands. Eventually, we see this pretty big Kurdish country does go ahead and form, looking something like this. Meanwhile, over here, we see that a lot of countries have expanded up over into Anatolia, with this kind of Venetian state expanding. But you see that Athens has expanded its influence very nicely, looking something like this, being bigger over here than actually in Athens, which, again, really weird. But we also see over here that pretty pretty significantly, Macedonia will be expanding its borders quite a lot, looking something like this. And we also actually see that North Macedonia expands its borders into this region. Lastly, we see that this Izmir country does go ahead and expand its realm. A pretty significant amount, although not too big. But yeah, there we go. I'm conscious of the time. This recording is looking extremely long. And I don't, want to make like a 45-minute video. So I am going to cut it here. I've technically done everything I wanted, although there hasn't actually been that many map changes. I was thinking I could probably create some more like... Oh, actually, there's one more thing I need to do with the Swiss over here. But I could create some like English and Welsh countries, maybe some Iberian countries, African countries, Anatolian countries, and Bulgarian countries. But I think that I will do that next episode, which I'll probably actually end up recording straight after this, because I honestly cannot close this map with it looking like this, because it looks unfinished. But for this episode, at least, I'm going to be stopping it here, because, yeah, we've been recording for more than enough. But anyway, going over to the Swiss, we see that the son of the current consul, whose name is Johann, he's going to be the first character I'm naming. Important characters, we have the dictator from the Swiss Republic early days that expanded it quite a lot. We have the Venetian fisherman, and then we have Johann over here. But anyway, this Johann guy is the son of the current consul, and he's a pretty good warrior. He was kind of like a hero in the Civil War. If you saw, he kind of conquered a bunch of land up here, and also a bunch of land up here. And he's going to be going on a bit of a conquests. And what is he trying to do? Well, he's trying to subjugate all of these tribes up here, and he will be launching various campaigns. We see that the first campaign goes pretty well, as he manages to push pretty deep into this territory. And eventually he's like, you know what, that's pretty good for us, we'll call it there. But then barbarians start attacking them, and we quickly see that a lot of this land is lost. So the son will go ahead and return. And when Johann returns, he will do incredibly well, absolutely crushing these tribes, forcing them back up here. And he will go ahead and move eastward, pushing them back even more. And eventually, we see that all of these tribes went up submitting over to the Swiss. And we can go ahead and see what the Swiss new borders look like. We see that the Swiss go ahead and push up to this little river here, looking something like this. Conquering up all of this new land, expanding this territory nicely, but it also looks kind of weird now. It's way less Swiss and more like, I don't know. This kind of looks like the Dutch Empire. No, it's the Dutch. They're here. But anyway, I think that is the end of the video. Other than power rankings, these were the previous power rankings. And we can go ahead and look at the next ones. The number one country is the Swiss. They have managed to make a pretty big revival, and they are now back at being number one. The number two country is France, or Provence over here. They're really close behind the Swiss. These two are like far ahead to everyone else now because of the huge war. The number three country is actually going to be Florence. With their new cavalry and their new expansion, they are pretty strong. Number four country is actually going over to Sicily. They have had an absolute glow up. Number five will still be Venice. They did get absolutely cooked, but like they still own their land here, their land here, and their land here. And they're still decently strong, you know. Okay, quick intermission, but I made this kind of country yellow. But anyway, we can go back to the power rankings. It was just annoying me. We're on number 4. Well, no, we're on number 5 now. Well, no, we're on number 6 now. Oh my god, I can't speak. Number 6 is going to go over to Valencia. Number 7 will actually be going over to Austria, with number 8 falling over to Croatia. Number 9 will fall over to this new Kurdish state over here. And then number 10 will actually be going over to this Izmir country, which has, you know, made itself quite notable in this episode. Some contenders, as always, we see over here that Brittany is a pretty big contender. They just kind of always fall short. Who else? Do you know, we're not really actually at this point. They just got beat. Albania, decent contender. Macedonia, not really Serbia actually, Albania, Macedonia, and I guess kind of Athens because of this new land. They're kind of contenders, and I think that is about it for contenders. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I hope it's not too long. And I don't know if I'm going to record the next episode or edit the next episode first. I think I might actually try edit the next episode first. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed. And I'll see you in the next one, I guess. What episode will it be? Episode 9? Don't know what's going to happen in it, but it'll be something cool, I guess.